The car door connected with my skull at exactly 4:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon. I know the precise time because my phone screen was still visible in my hand. 911 already dialed, but not yet called, when the world exploded into stars and darkness. I'd been breathing wrong again. My name is Sophia, and at 16, I'd learned to control almost every bodily function to avoid my father's rage. I could eat without making a sound, walk without my footsteps echoing, even cry silently with tears rolling down my face like rain on glass. But breathing was the one thing I couldn't master to his satisfaction. "You sound like a fucking dog panting back there," Dad had snarled from the driver's seat, his eyes finding mine in the rearview mirror. We were parked outside the grocery store, waiting for Mom to come back with her wine. She always needed wine for these family drives. "I'm sorry," I whispered, trying to breathe more shallowly, but that only made it worse. The August heat had turned the car into an oven, and the air conditioning had been broken for months. Dad said fixing it would be a waste of money better spent on important things. Like Mom's wine. "Sorry." He twisted around in his seat, his face already purple with that familiar rage. "You're always sorry. Sorry for breathing, sorry for existing, sorry for being too stupid to do anything right." I pressed myself against the back door, my hand sliding to my phone. I'd started keeping it ready, 911 pre-dialed, just waiting for the send button. 3 months ago, after he'd broken my wrist for typing too loud on my homework, I'd promised myself that next time would be different. Next time, I'd have proof. Mom appeared at the passenger window, holding 2 bottles of red wine and laughing at something on her phone. She slid into the seat, already tipsy from whatever she'd been drinking before we left the house. "What's the drama now?" she asked, noting Dad's position. "Your daughter is panting like an animal again." Mom turned to look at me, her eyes glassy and mean. "Maybe she's part dog. Would explain why she's such a bitch." They both laughed. That's when Dad got out of the car. I should have known what was coming from the deliberate way he moved, like a predator who'd already decided on the kill. He walked around to my side of the car, and I scrambled to lock the door, but child locks are cruel that way. Designed to keep kids safe, but in my family they kept me trapped. He yanked the door open. "Get out. Dad, please. Get out." I started to slide across to the other side, but he grabbed my arm, pulling me back toward the open door. My head was just passing through the door frame when I heard Mom say, "God, even her fear is annoying." That's when he did it. The door came forward with all his strength behind it. The edge caught me right at the temple, and for a moment, the pain was so intense it went beyond feeling into something else, a white-hot nothing that consumed everything. I felt my skull compress, heard something crack that might have been bone or might have been the car's interior, tasted copper flooding my mouth. "Maybe now your skull matches your IQ, Dad roared, pulling the door back for another swing. But my body had already started falling, half in and half out of the car. Blood ran into my eyes, warm and thick, and through the red haze, I saw Mom lean over from the front seat, giggling. "The blood really brings out your worthlessness," she slurred, wine breath wafting over me. "Like makeup, but honest." My phone was still in my hand. Muscle memory more than conscious thought made my thumb hit the call button. As Dad grabbed my hair to position me for another blow, I managed to gasp out 3 words. "Help. Parking lot." Then I played dead. It wasn't hard. The edge of unconsciousness kept pulling at me, and blood loss made everything distant and strange. But I held on, keeping the phone hidden under my body, letting them think they'd knocked me out. "Shit," Dad said, but he didn't sound worried. Just inconvenienced. "Now we have to deal with this." "She's fine," Mom said. "Drama queen is probably faking. Slam her again." In public, Dad looked around the parking lot. A few people were loading groceries, but nobody was looking our way. "Let's get her home first." They argued about it for 30 seconds. 30 seconds where the 911 operator was recording everything, where my blood was pooling on the asphalt, where witnesses were starting to notice something was wrong. "Sir, is that girl okay?" A woman's voice, distant but concerned. "Mind your own fucking business," Dad snarled. That's when the sirens started. Dad's face went white. Mom dropped her wine bottle, and it shattered on the ground, red wine mixing with my blood in an abstract painting of violence. "You little bitch," Dad hissed, seeing my phone. "You called." The police cars screeched into the parking lot, followed by an ambulance. Officers surrounded us before Dad could run, though I saw him calculate it, his eyes darting between escape routes. "Step away from the girl," an officer commanded, hand on his weapon. This is my daughter, Dad protested. She fell. She's clumsy, always has been. Sir, step away now. The EMTs rushed to me, and I finally let myself speak. He slammed my head in the door. I whispered to the female EMT who was holding my neck stable. On purpose, because I was breathing too loud. She looked at the clear door-edge-shaped wound on my temple, the pattern of the weather stripping actually imprinted in the swelling, and her face went hard. We've got you now, sweetheart. You're safe. As they loaded me onto the stretcher, I heard the 911 recording being played back through an officer's phone. My gasp, help. Parking lot. Then Dad's voice, clear as day. Now we have to deal with this. Mom's drunk suggestion to slam her again. Their argument about waiting until they got home. That's attempted murder, one officer said. The call proves premeditation for the second assault. They arrested Dad right there, his face purple again, but with fear this time. Mom tried to play the victim, claiming she was drunk and didn't know what was happening, but they arrested her too. Accessory to attempted murder, child endangerment, failure to protect. At the hospital, Dr. Martinez documented everything with a meticulousness that felt like care. The skull fracture that could have killed me with another blow. The traumatic brain injury that would need monitoring. The old injuries, healed fractures in my arms, scars on my back, damage that told a story of years of abuse. The 911 call saved your life, she told me. Not just because it brought help, but because it recorded everything. Their own words will convict them. My Aunt Sarah arrived at the hospital 6 hours later, having driven from 3 states away. She took one look at me and burst into tears. I knew, she sobbed. I suspected for years, but your mom always had excuses, and you never said anything. He said no one would believe me over them, I explained, my voice thick from the concussion. They were respected. Dad owns a business. Mom's on the PDA. Who'd believe they tortured their daughter for breathing? Everyone, Sarah said firmly. Everyone who hears that recording. The trial was 8 months later. My head had healed, leaving a scar that followed my hairline, hidden unless you knew to look for it. But the real evidence was in that 2-minute phone call. The prosecutor played it for the jury. My gasp plea. The discussion of further violence. The casual cruelty of planning to wait until they got home to continue the assault. Mom's drunk laughter about blood bringing out my worthlessness. Dad's lawyer tried to argue it was a momentary loss of control, that the door closing was accidental. But the medical evidence destroyed that claim. The angle of impact, the force required to fracture a skull, the door edge pattern pressed into my skin. It all pointed to deliberate assault. This wasn't discipline gone wrong, the prosecutor said in closing arguments. This was attempted murder. He tried to crush his daughter's skull because he didn't like the sound of her breathing. And when he thought he'd succeeded, his only concern was avoiding consequences. Mom's lawyer went for the alcoholism defense, claiming diminished capacity. But the recording caught her clearly encouraging more violence, and her history of covering up previous abuse showed a pattern of enabling. When it was my turn to give a victim impact statement, I stood carefully. The traumatic brain injury still affected my balance sometimes. You tried to kill me for breathing, I said, looking directly at Dad. The most basic human function, and you found it offensive. But here's what you didn't understand. Every breath I took was defiance. Every inhale was me choosing to live despite you. And that 911 call, that was me breathing my truth into the world. I turned to Mom. You laughed while my blood hit the ground. You found entertainment in my potential death. But that wine you dropped, it mixed with my blood on the asphalt, and the crime scene photos show it clearly. You literally toasted my attempted murder. The jury saw that. Everyone saw that. Dad got 25 years for attempted murder and aggravated child abuse. Mom got 15 as an accessory. Both lost all parental rights, and Dad's business collapsed within months as the story spread through our community. The woman from the parking lot testified too. She'd started recording on her phone when she heard Dad curse at her, catching the aftermath. Me unconscious, blood pooling, them arguing about covering it up. Her testimony sealed their fate. I live with Aunt Sarah now. She's helped me through the physical therapy for the brain injury, the night terrors where I still feel the door coming toward my skull, the panic attacks triggered by car doors closing too hard. But I'm healing. I breathe as loudly as I want now, deep, full breaths that fill my lungs and prove I'm alive. Sometimes I record myself breathing, just to remind myself that the sound isn't offensive. It's the sound of survival. The scar on my temple has faded to a thin white line, but I don't hide it. When people ask, I tell them the truth. My father tried to kill me for breathing too loud, but I breathed long enough to call 911. The police gave me a copy of that call after the trial. 2 minutes and 13 seconds that changed everything. I've never listened to it. I lived it once, and that was enough. But I keep it saved in 3 different places. Proof that sometimes the smallest acts of defiance can topple the tallest tyrants. These days, I volunteer at a teen crisis hotline. When kids call, scared and whispering, afraid their parents will hear, I always tell them the same thing. Keep breathing. Keep your phone ready. Document everything. And remember, your breath is not too loud, your existence is not too much, and your truth deserves to be heard. Dad thought he could silence me by crushing my skull. Instead, he amplified my voice through a 911 recording that will follow him for the rest of his life. Every parole hearing, that recording will play. Every appeal, those words will echo. Slam her again. He was right about one thing, though. My brain was damaged. The traumatic brain injury left me with some processing issues and occasional migraines. But my IQ? Tested higher after the injury than before. Turns out, surviving attempted murder is excellent motivation for academic excellence. I graduated valedictorian last month. In my speech, I talked about the power of breathing, of using your voice, of refusing to be silenced. I didn't mention Dad directly, but everyone knew. Our small town had followed the trial obsessively. The car door slammed on my skull when I was 16. Now, at 18, I'm heading to college on a full scholarship, planning to study law. I want to be the prosecutor who plays those recordings, who shows those photos, who makes sure that every parent who hurts their child for breathing faces justice. Because breathing isn't a crime. It's a revolution, one inhale at a time.